I'm John V. Welcome to Chautauqua People. My guest today is George Wirth, a Presbyterian pastor. He was born in Rockville Center, Long Island, New York, and moved with his parents as his father, also a Presbyterian pastor, was called to various churches. George was subsequently sent off to boarding school after the fourth move, missing his father's final two callings. He subsequently did his undergraduate work at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, received an MDiv from Princeton, and his doctorate from Pittsburgh Theological Seminary. After ordination by the Presbytery of Philadelphia, he was called to churches in Bryn Mawr and Sewickley, Pennsylvania. His final pastorate was at First Presbyterian Church in Atlanta, Georgia, where he is pastor emeritus following his retirement in 2013. His ministry is marked by frequent participation on domestic community service boards. He completed 9 mission trips to Kenya, 3 to Haiti, and 1 each to Jamaica and South Africa. He completed 6 pulpit exchanges with churches in Scotland. Lastly, George was captain of the rugby team at UNC Chapel Hill. George, how did you make your way to Chautauqua?
Well, and thank you for inviting me to be on, John.
My pleasure.
I'm grateful. When I was in Sewickley, Pennsylvania, the first year was 1977. We had a 2-year-old daughter named Allie, and the senior minister of the Shadyside Presbyterian Church, Robert Holland, and his wife Donna invited us to come to Chautauqua. And so we came up that summer. We stayed 1 week with them in their home right there on South Lake Drive. And when the week was over, we were pulling out, had packed the luggage in the car. Our daughter, 2.5 years old, was with us. And Dr. Holland said to Allie, "Where are you going?" She said, "We're going to the Poconos," because we had a little place in the Poconos. And Dr. Holland looked at this little girl, our daughter, and said, "Well, why are you going there? It always rains in the Poconos." She started to cry, and we've never been back to the Poconos since. We have been coming to Chautauqua since 1977. We lived in suburban Pittsburgh, as you said, in Sewickley, for 13 years, and all those years we came here. We eventually bought a house and then knocked it down because it was falling down and built a house. My wife helped with the architect to make this house one that would sleep 10 people. At that time we just had 1 child and then a second child. Now we have 4 grandchildren, added up with my wife and myself. It's exactly 10, so we built the right size home. And we love coming here. Our children grew up here, now our 4 grandchildren are coming here, and it is our home, away from home in Atlanta, Georgia.
Now, how long are you here during the summer?
We stay the first 4 weeks of the season, and then we rent it for the next 5 weeks to help pay the taxes like many other friends. But we've been coming up, John, 2, sometimes 3 weeks before the season begins, which I can do now that I'm semi-retired. I don't work in the church full-time anymore. And so the quieter time, those 2 or 3 weeks prior to the season, we've come to really enjoy.
Mm-hmm. What do you do during that quiet time?
I'm a bass fisherman. I have a little bass fishing boat. I've got my fly rods and I go out on the lake 2 or 3 mornings a week. I play golf, and we have, as you know, a first-rate Donna Ross golf course, which is literally across the street from our front porch, and I love playing that golf course. I also like to walk with my wife. I've just had 2 knees replaced, so I can't run anymore. Mm-hmm. But walking around the campus is a great delight, seeing all the beauty of what is in creation itself, and also the homes and the different buildings that are all historic and mean so much to so many people. Those are the things that I really enjoy doing.
Right. Now tell me about your guest preaching at Chautauqua.
Guest preaching at Chautauqua, actually I did it once.
Really?
When Cardinal McCarrick, who's in the news right now, had to cancel, and Joan Brown Campbell, who was then the director of the Department of Religion, said, "You're up to bat. I had 1 week's notice. So I preached, I was the chaplain of the week. But what I've done mostly since 1980 is been like an associate to the chaplain or an assistant to the chaplain. And I work for the Department of Religion for Bill Jackson first, and then for Ross McKenzie, and then for Joan Brown Campbell, and then for Bob Franklin, who is from Atlanta. We hope to recruit him to come. And now I've just begun to work with Bishop Gene Robinson, and this is a very exciting opportunity for me. I serve as the liturgist in worship. I help to introduce 2 o'clock lecturers. I have taught Bible studies for many years. I'm not doing that now. And I've worked with a new clergy group sponsored by the Lilly Endowment, and I've done that with Rabbi Sam Stahl for the last 10 years. We're in a hiatus this summer, but those are the things primarily that I've been fortunate to be asked to do.
So those are some very substantial activities, aren't they?
It has been very meaningful to me, and I want to make a contribution, but I don't want to work full-time up here. And since I retired, I've had a little bit more relaxation time than even what I used to do up here.
Right. Now let's talk for just a moment about some of your Atlanta activities. And you told me about the CF Foundation. Can you tell me what that is?
It's Cousins Family Foundation, CF, and it was founded by a man who is a remarkable person in the city of Atlanta and around this country named Tom Cousins. He helped to recruit us to come to Atlanta from suburban Pittsburgh. He's a Presbyterian, and we became very close friends in the process of the 23 years that I served the church. When I retired from the church, he asked me to come work for the foundation, and he said to me, "John, I have a project for you." And I said, "Well, what's that?" He said, "I'm concerned about the decline of religion in America. Let's look into that." I said, "That's my job." He says, "It is." So for the last 5 years, I have developed projects to help focus on children and youth and young adults and older adults about the importance of faith, and that means not only Christian faith, but all the faith traditions in America, because we are now, as you know, a multi-faith nation. And these projects, mostly in concert with partnerships in Washington, D.C., have been what I've spent my last 5 years on. One of them now teaching about religion in the public schools. That is to embed a project into a program into the state of Georgia that will help not only the children, youth, and adults in our state, but eventually in other states and maybe around the country, teach about religion in the public schools, which is constitutional and actually mandated, but to do it in the right way. Not to be afraid of it, not to overdo by evangelizing any of the kids. And I have heard on that project for the last 4 years, and I enjoy doing that very much. Just one example.
Okay. Could you tell me a little more about what you're doing and how the program goes for, let's say, somebody in senior high school can read and may ask some questions?
The 2 school districts that we're focused on now, the largest in the state of Georgia is Gwinnett. One of the smallest is Bleckley. We have gone in with our team with collaboration from Washington, D.C., the Religious Freedom Foundation. We have gone in and trained teachers. We've written curriculum for them to teach. We have gone into the school boards and helped them develop what we call Civility 101, how to talk about these things without getting into problems or escalating negative issues. And so the way it's working now, we have gotten real buy-in from these 2 school districts. Within the 3rd and the 4th years coming up, we're going to spread across other school districts in Georgia. And our goal is to be in every school district in Georgia sometime in our lifetime, and then spread this across the nation. We've had 5 states who have already contacted us wanting to know if they can get in on this once we're up and running in Georgia.
Okay. And what grades then would have the program and classes?
It starts, and I was surprised when we began doing this, because I thought it would be middle school and high school. It starts in kindergarten, John. Part of that is not just reminding the kids that there were real people called Pilgrims and Puritans who came here a long time ago, Thanksgiving. That was a religious tradition that brought them here. But we're teaching children to meet and talk with children of different faith traditions without being afraid and being respectful. And you can actually begin to teach that to kids in elementary school. We have a person that we brought in from the Tony Blair Foundation in England who is an Episcopal priest. She is a specialist in civility and civil discourse, and so she has written into our curriculum how this can be taught and how it can be learned.
Great. Now, is there a lot of money that has to be on the table for this to work?
There is, and that's been my primary role for the foundation, helping our foundation to give a significant gift for 3 years, but to recruit other foundations and individuals, not only in Atlanta, but across Georgia and around the country. And we've raised in excess of $5 million to do this project so far, and we're going to continue to raise money when we go national.
Good.
It will cost a lot more money, but eventually the school districts in our state and in other states will put it into their own budgets because they will recognize the value as to why this really matters. For kids in elementary and middle school are religious traditions, but by the time you get to high school, we teach about all the religious traditions that exist in the state of Georgia and around America, including Christianity, Judaism, and Islam.
Right.
And we want that to become one of the trademarks of what we're doing.
Now, most of the staff then are from Christian traditions?
Most of the staff from the Cousins Foundation in Christian traditions, the people we partner with in D.C., most of them are in Christian traditions, but some are Jewish, and there have been other collaborators who have been Muslim. In the school districts themselves, we're finding more and more people who are not only Christian in Georgia, but who are Jewish and who are Muslim, and many who are of no faith tradition at all. And that also is brokered into our program so that people can know in our country, if you're not a religious person, you're not ostracized or unable to participate in this program. That's very important to us and to the CF Foundation as well.
Great.
Which is, by the way, what has become at Chautauqua one of the most exciting things for me when the Board of Trustees, with the guidance of the Religion Department years ago, declared that we would be an Abrahamic community. And you may have been on the board, John, at that time when it was done. Very significant. It makes us unique at Chautauqua, and I've enjoyed participating in many of those programs over the past 35 or 40 years.
Now, is the Abrahamic tradition still appropriate for Chautauqua?
It is, and even more so.
So here's my point. And understand, I spent 5 years in Korea, so I've had a lot of talk with people from a Buddhist tradition.
Yeah.
If you come from one of a different tradition and you're excluded, let's say you come from a Buddhist tradition, it's the Abrahamic initiative for you.
That Abrahamic tradition took courage on the part of the Board of Trustees.
Indeed.
Because not everybody was in favor of that.
Indeed.
But what it has done, as you well know, because you were part of that decision-making process, is it has sent the signal that not only are Christians and Jews welcomed here, but Muslims are welcomed here. We have a Muslim program for young people. We have Fridays that are now more and more of the Muslim tradition where speakers come, and it is really introducing these different religious traditions to people at Chautauqua where they would not have an opportunity to get that in their hometowns or the schools that they attend. I think it is one of the most significant things that has ever happened since 1874 in Chautauqua. And a lot of things have happened.
I agree to broaden it. I'm going beyond Abrahamic in my own way of doing things.
Yeah, exactly, and I agree with that. I saw a man today who was dressed in saffron robes at 2 o'clock lecture, listening to John Shelby Spong, And the audience, you could see, was very diverse with a lot of different kinds of... But that man in his saffron robes is not an Abrahamic tradition guy.
No.
Thank God.
No. And that's the challenge.
It is.
And I had long talked with Joan Brown Campbell about this. And I understand the board and the Department of Religion had some very severe criticism from long-term Chautauquans when they broadened and went beyond a Christian base. And that is to their credit to have the courage to do that.
Oh, I agree. And I've been very grateful for the opportunity to work with all the directors since 1980. And now more and more, that is primary focus. I want to tell you a story. You may have been there in the amphitheater. We took a risk when we invited what is now Unitarian Universalist, but he was a Unitarian. His name was Forrester Church, and he was from a church in New York City. Forrester Church was the first Unitarian who had been invited to preach on a Sunday morning, which has been traditionally Christian worship. But Joan Brown Campbell knew him and invited him to come. The entire congregation, 4,000 to 5,000 people, were sitting there. And when Joan introduced him, she said, Forrester Church is a Unitarian Universalist from New York City. And of course, there were a lot of people in the congregation wondering, is this appropriate? This is supposed to be a Christian worship service. He finally climbs into the pulpit wearing a beautiful white robe and alb. And he says, Dr. Campbell, thank you for the invitation. I realized that there was some risk involved in inviting me. He said, so I want to ask you and everyone here, what do you get when you cross a Jehovah's Witness with a Unitarian? And then he looks around and he says, someone who comes knocking on your door for no apparent reason. And John, the place exploded. And that man was embraced by 5,000 people. That is the secret of Chautauqua and of the religion program. Now to be accepting, embracing people of all walks of life, traditions, races, creeds, colors. This place is now on the move, more and more in that direction.
I remember Forest Church, and I remember about 1995, something in that order, when he preached, and a pastor's wife from a Christian tradition came up to me and said, after listening to him, I could be a Unitarian.
Yeah.
Yeah. It wasn't meant as a criticism, but as an observation. But indeed, he struck a chord that was appropriate for
He won
Chautauquans.
Chautauqua, especially the people that were not happy. He won them over with that one opening in the story.
He did.
You were there.
I remember him there. And I got a couple other things that I know that are in my lexicon that are quotes from him.
Yeah.
And he gave a sermon, and he said, summer is not a time for perfection. And so if the house isn't spotlessly cleaned or your clothing isn't currently pressed, forget it. Go talk with somebody and laugh.
Oh, good.
And I
Good.
thought summer's not a time for perfection. That's a good comeback.
There was another preacher in 1999 who was the president of Union Theological Seminary. He stood in front of the same number of people. Everybody's anticipating 2000 and the 21st century. And he said, and I quote him now, the future of the 21st century is going to depend on the religious traditions across this country learning to live together in peace, not only here in America, but around the world. That was a mouthful. And he was right.
That's right.
And we take that seriously at Chautauqua.
We certainly do. We certainly do. Let's have one more religion question here. And you may have an idea of what's coming now. But a recent Time magazine item on happiness caught my eye. And if we take a look, they break out predictors of happiness. And it indicates that the most happy cohort by age is over the age of 65. The most happy cohort by employment status is retired. And the most happy group by their work are clergy. I wonder if you have any take on that.
I have an initial reaction because there are a lot of surveys that have been done. I'm a Presbyterian minister, but I've seen surveys in magazines of all kinds of ministers and priests and pastors. And there is a mixed reaction sometimes when certain questions are asked about a sense of happiness, especially when it comes to financial matters, because you don't go into the ministry in order to become a rich person. I certainly didn't. But with that said, this survey, which I'm going to borrow from you so I can read it, if I might, this survey could have to do with clergy who are in a helping profession where you're making a difference in the lives of other people, many of whom are hurting and struggling and need someone to come alongside them. To serve in that way brings great joy to the heart. And I've been fortunate to be in that serving calling career for 45 years, and although I'm retired from full-time ministry, I still am involved in ministry, and it brings great not only joy but peace to my heart to know that I can still reach out and touch people in God's name and be welcomed by them, and to walk alongside them so that they know that they're not alone. That brings joy and
Indeed.
happiness to clergy people.
Indeed. Now let's go a little further than that. When I looked at the resume you gave me, you've had long service at 2 churches where you served as the senior pastor. And one was 13 years, and I guess the other was 23 years.
Yes.
Well, I thought that's immensely uncommon to stay that long. And as you have implied, you found that work to be very satisfying. We've had some clergy in my family who also have been long-term service, upwards of 20 years in the same church. What advice would you give to a young Chautauquan who would come to you for counseling and say that he or she is considering going into the ministry?
Yeah, great question. And some of the new clergy conferences that I've worked on with Rabbi Sam Stahl and Joan Brown Campbell and others, we have exactly that. Young people, most of whom are brand new in the ministry, but the ones that I like to talk to are still in high school or in college. And those young people, if they have been exposed to a healthy congregation, whether it's Jewish, Muslim, Christian, whichever, if they've been exposed to a religion that has been viable for them, not pushy or frightening to them, accepting other people, if they have witnessed that and been part of that, then I would say to them, do not be hesitant. Go ahead and look at the law, look at medicine, look at teaching, all the other career paths, but do not avoid finding out from a couple of seminaries what they might offer to you as a career path. I'm fortunate to be on the board of Princeton Theological Seminary, and I have been able in the churches that I've served to encourage young people, not push them, but encourage them to at least open the door and to explore. And I don't need to tell you, because you probably can guess, seminaries aren't exactly booming these days with more students than they can handle. So the ones that we send to them, they will be very receptive, especially if they know that clergy people have been guiding these younger people to come and see. I would also say to them, if you're interested in the ministry, if you really want to know more about it, I would be very glad to have an ongoing conversation with you just to tell you what it has meant for me and my family growing up with my father as a Presbyterian minister. And I would be honest with them about some of the struggles as well as the great satisfaction and joy, as we were talking about a second ago. They want to know from an honest person, is this something that I could do that I would find fulfilling?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And where I teach at Campbell, we opened a divinity school a few years ago.
Good.
And we've had good luck keeping that full, and our graduates do good things. But we know not everybody is in that situation.
Yeah. It's interesting, your question, John, because a lot of ministers have been criticized for not reaching out to the kids in their churches, high school, college age, because that looked like they were a little too aggressive. Well, ministers recruit people for just about everything else in the church. Rabbis recruit, imams recruit. Why not recruit people to at least explore the ministry? God knows we need good people in all of the religions that we've got in America. People who are older like I am have an opportunity to tell the story and say, take a look. And if I can be helpful, I'm more than willing to do that.
And I've heard a couple of points. It's, in some instances, denominations are running divinity schools and telling their young graduates, you may be a minister on a part-time basis because the population of the church is not high, and we're losing members. You'll have to have another job, but understand that's the situation. The church where I go, which is economically in very good shape, is having trouble filling an associate pastor position.
Yeah.
And it's robust and in every dimension in good shape. So I see those as being contradictory positions.
Yeah, and in America, as everyone is aware, the mainline church decline has been for more than a quarter of a century, statistically proven. But there are still a lot of great congregations of all the denominations. There are great seminaries of all the denominations. And we have to re-gauge not only how we recruit and train people going into the ministry, we need to re-gauge how the churches operate in this different environment, because they're not just walking in on Sunday mornings like they used to.
Mm-mm.
You have to have something that you offer that is unique and not a gimmick, but something that is of interest to people, enough that they will come and try it out, a congregation, on a Friday night or a Saturday morning or a Sunday morning.
Now, I've got one last question.
Yeah.
And you said your church is doing some substantial work with video, or the church where you're the pastor emeritus. Can you tell us a little bit about that? What they do,
Yeah,
and what's the goal and how well they achieve that?
Yeah, I'm going to preface it by saying that the Presbyterian Church in the 1970s was considering going into the television business big time. And for financial reasons, even though we had enough money, they wanted to reprioritize that money elsewhere. So we did not buy in, but Jerry Falwell did, and Pat Robertson did, and a lot of others did, and they took over television so that the mainline denominations really never were able to be part of that ministry. Some local churches with vision, like First Presbyterian Church in Atlanta, back in 1986, there was a great preacher there, Paul Eckel, who was made for television. They decided to go into a television ministry. They bought all the equipment, they hired the staff, and they wound up on the AIB, Atlanta Interfaith Broadcast Channel, and so probably 10,000 people would tune in and see First Presbyterian Church on a Sunday. That ministry, together with the Sunday morning radio ministry of First Presbyterian Church, which is the longest continuous religious broadcast in America, WSB Radio, 1921. The reach of those two ministries, radio and TV, was about 25,000 a week. The church will continue doing that as long as they know it's making a difference in the lives of people. And letters come in, we never ask for money, but there's a lot of response, and many people visit for the first time from all over 30 miles around, and they say, shaking the hand going out the door, we watched on TV last Sunday and we wanted to come and see what it was like. Now, not every church can afford to do that, but most every church, John, and your church in North Carolina is doing some with video. Most churches can put a camera in front of the pulpit and live stream without having to pay a whole lot of money. It's worth every dime. And you don't have to have the greatest preacher in the world, but you've got to have something to convey that is worth showing people by TV or revealing it by radio. And I would encourage people that are watching this program to talk with their pastors about how to invest in that kind of a media ministry. You know the importance of it.
I'm working on a paper for us to begin live streaming. If it has my name on it, I don't want to do a mediocre introduction, and we've got a template to work with. I've gone to 5 churches and look what they're doing and compare their equipment to what's been proposed for us. And in every one of them, when I have talked to the pastor, quietly explained what I'm doing, away from the press of Sunday morning greeting people, they've expressed to me that better than half the people who come in anew say they first watched this church with some degree of regularity on a live stream.
Yeah, exactly. And not only is it good to spread that word through live streaming in particular and welcome people to come in, but it means that mainline churches can give an alternative to some of the things that are on television that wouldn't exactly be my cup of tea. Mm-hmm. Sometimes with a lot of pressure to give money. Mm-hmm. And that sometimes is not as much a religious broadcast as it is a religious business. Yep. That's not what we're talking about. Indeed. We're talking about a new and unique way to spread the word that's healthy and helps people and brings them into the church.
Indeed, indeed. George, we are about out of time, and the crew always indulges me. What else do we need to talk about?
I want to say to you and the crew here, Devin and Chuck, that what you're doing here makes a difference too. I'm looking forward, because now that I found out about the work, these 5 years that you've been doing, the three of you together, I want to see as many of the videos as I can. I'm going to watch for television on your channel and see if I can tune in. And I just want to commend you for what you're doing here. And it's about a place and people that you and I know and love, Chautauqua. I mean, that's about as important a message as you can convey to anybody, anywhere.
Thank you much.
Bravo for doing it. And as David McCullough would say in one of his great lectures, on you go.
Thank you much. And it's been great fun. Do come back.
Thank you very much, John. I enjoyed this a great deal.
Great fun.